let's get on to the first subject, which is the homeless problem. And the homeless problem continues to grow. And I've always been wondering what progress is being made in fixing this problem. And all of the tax money that we're providing, where does it go? So I started out by writing a couple of columns. And I wrote the one the first one that appeared in the year, which I called the Roaring 20s, Take 20. And then I came up with another one. It says, Homeless and Wondering Where All the Money Went. And the city then responded, telling us how lucky we are that we were able to secure $425,000 worth of grants from Measure H. That's pretty good considering we contributed about $14 million. Well, maybe that's not so good. So I ended up writing a third column, which will come out. You'll see it on Thursday, tomorrow. It says, Fixing the Homeless Problem, How Much Money is Enough? And really, most of this presentation is based upon going back in time and seeing what they actually promised us and where we're going from here. So just from a standpoint of all of our people in the audience, do you think homelessness in Santa Clarita Valley is a problem? Certainly, is it worth talking about? I think it is. Because we have a lot of people in the valley that are very close to being living on the street. And I hear that a lot when I go to the Senior Center Advisory Board. When I go to the Senior Center Advisory Board, people talk about what they're living on and how close it is. I mean, if you're living on Social Security, when your Social Security check doesn't cover your rent, you're in trouble. And that's something that is building quite a great deal here in Santa Clarita. Will your rent be affordable in the future?
Can you pull the mic a little bit closer? It's muffled.
Turn it up a little. So, that better?
I think so.
Okay. So the question is, will your rent be affordable? And what about the price of utilities? You know, I was at a different presentation with B.J. Adkins today. He was talking about voting, and that's what the changes are going to be in our voting system. And that's something we're going to have a presentation on at the next meeting. But he talked about, what it costs, like, for water. And what the difference is how much water we're using inside the house or outside the house. And this last month, I was able to determine how much the difference is because I didn't have my sprinklers on because it rained and it was all that. And I found out that my water outside the house is more than what I use inside. And but I started looking at the bill. And I started thinking about my mother because I pay her water bill also. So I looked at the water bill and it was $31. But $23 of it is a fee for just having a water meter. So here again, when we're talking about seniors and people that are living on Social Security, that could be a problem. So you think about if you have family members or friends that could be affected by the homelessness issue, and are you willing to help them? You know, that's something that hits me closely. When I moved out here to Santa Clarita in 1965, I moved in with a gentleman named Eddie Morris. We lived with him for 6 months while we were looking for a house so we could save a little bit of money. He was really great. And this probably was about 10 years ago. Another friend of mine that lived with him also later on in the same situation found him wandering homeless up and down Sierra Highway. And so we grabbed him and got him an apartment in Newhall and worked to get him his Social Security because he was really disabled. He had a traumatic accident years ago And it was really interesting because he could build cabinets with that. You know, he was a cabinet maker, built cabinets great, but he couldn't balance the checkbook. And he was, besides that, he was a functional alcoholic, so they wouldn't give him money. They wanted somebody to take and be his Social Security representative payee. So I volunteered to do that. So for next 7 years, until he passed away, I paid his bills, made sure he had a place to live, and made sure he had money for food. And it made me aware that, you know what, sometimes it took some time, but yeah, that's not a big deal. And it kind of annoyed me a little bit when the Social Security Department told me, well, you can take 10% for the fee for doing this. No, I didn't take a penny. This is just something that you need to help your friends. So there might be a situation where you can help someone out. And all I hear when I hear about homelessness is, oh, we need to provide housing. We need to build affordable housing for people so they won't become homeless. But the homeless population is not just people that need housing. I mean, there's some people that are mentally challenged, right? They don't even know why they're homeless. There's some people that are physically challenged, can't work. There's some people that are job skills challenged. They don't have any skills to get a job. There's some people that are chemically addicted, and those categories are the majority of the homeless. And then there are those that are down on their luck, that ended up, for some reason or other, their job got terminated, or they were living close to the edge. But you know, it kind of annoys me too sometimes when you go over to like the food pantry and someone comes up to the food pantry to fill up their cart, and they drive up in their new Mercedes. I mean, what do you use your money for, right? It's just amazing. So just saying you want to provide them housing is not going to solve the problem. So on June 4th, 2019, just to emphasize the point, The Guardian published an article indicating that Los Angeles experienced a 16% increase in homeless population over the past year, from 18 to 19. And it went on to state there are now 36,000 homeless in the city of Los Angeles and nearly 59,000 across LA County, a 16 and 12% increase. Well, wait a minute, how could that be? We're spending a ton of money. How can, I just didn't understand that at all. Because in 2016, Garcetti said, the voters of LA have radically reshaped our future. The mayor led that effort, which passed Measure HHH. They had $1.2 billion that they were going to create a bond that would more than triple their annual production of supportive housing and build approximately 10,000 housing units. Oh, wait a minute. You got 36,000 homeless people. You're going to build 10,000 homeless units? And you're telling me that's going to solve the problem? I don't think so. But more so than that, when we started reading that the units they were building, they were talking about building them at $400,000 and $500,000 a piece. Well, you know what? That's crazy, right? So this obviously is not what the money is being spent on and didn't work. But the county said, oh my God, the city's doing this. I mean, LA City's doing all this. We got to get into this act because they might be building the homes, but we provide all the services for them. So they created Measure H. And LA County, when a bureaucrat sees someone else raising money, they can't resist. I mean, it's let's do it too. So what they did was they proposed a sales tax increase of 1/4 of 1 cent for a period of 10 years. And it's their estimate when they said it will generate approximately $350 million a year. 1/4 of a penny in sales tax. Wow, that's amazing. So what they said was the strategies we're going to prevent homelessness, we're going to increase income. I don't know, whose? Subsidize housing costs. Anybody got any subsidized housing? I don't know. Provide case management and other services. Increase access to affordable housing and create a coordinated delivery system. Well, the biggest problem with affordable housing is how much it costs to build a house. Now, I don't know of any contractor or developer in their right mind that would tell you, I'm going to build this big housing development and lose money on each one, right? They're out there to make money. So even if it's not a huge amount of money, when it costs $100,000 in permits and connection fees before you put one shovel in the ground, well, so much for affordable housing. So Katie Hill at the time was the CEO and executive director of PATH before she got elected, and they had a debate. The debate was at College of the Canyons, and she, the executive director, spoke in favor of the initiative. So her and Paul Ansel from the PATH, the LA Times talked about placing 45,000 individuals into permanent housing in the first 5 years. She claimed that if you voted yes on that quarter-cent sales tax, that they would end homelessness in 5 years. Okay? But at the debate, it's not kind of like our debate where when we put a microphone up in front and let you guys ask as many questions as you want. You had to write your questions down. You were lucky if you got one. I got one. And the question I asked, how would the funding be divided? Are you going to divide it up, geographically by the number of homeless people or whatever? And she didn't have an answer. She didn't know. So Measure H to end homelessness had a consolidated municipal and special election on Tuesday, March the 7th, 2017. It was the only thing on the ballot. Okay? Only one initiative, Measure H, quarter-cent sales tax for the next 10 years, required a 2/3 majority to pass, with a 67% majority voting for it, and it would collect $355 million per year for 10 years, making it $3.5 billion. Well, that's a pretty good chunk of change. Wonder where it's going to go. So I wanted to know how much Santa Clarita was going to contribute. So what I did was I took the population of LA County at that time and the population of Santa Clarita at that time, and I ratioed it. Thinking that, the average person will buy the same amount of stuff everywhere. And that comes out to $7.8 million a year coming out of Santa Clarita. And I said, why are we going to do this? Why are we going to send all this money down there? I mean, if we did that, we would have enough money to build a $30 million homeless shelter and give it $4 million a year to operate. Right? Well, we certainly haven't seen that kind of money yet. So who was hurt the most by this? Again, we're going to talk about people on a fixed income, because I don't care if you start giving me this nonsense that if I buy a $40 sweater, it's only going to cost me a dime, right? Or how little it's going to cost in a purchase. It's going to cost you on every single purchase that you make. And so for people that are on a very tight budget, it creates even more difficulty paying their bills. So Measure H itself didn't tell us how they were going to spend the money. That's part of the reason I opposed it drastically, and I went to the council to talk about it, because as you will see, our city council didn't do much about it. So the question was, Measure H doesn't disclose a spend plan, and they didn't indicate whether it was going to be geographic, and they didn't indicate what services they were going to provide. They only talked what the money may be spent on. Okay? Not what it will be spent on, what it may be spent on. I guess it may not also, right? That's the way that works. Because this is my comment. Whenever you create a large bureaucracy with $3.5 billion over 10 years, it will never go away. What will happen is you'll end up after the 10 years, and they'll come back to you and say, need more money. Right? Just what happens all that time. And in actuality, as soon as Katie Hill got elected, she started saying, whoop, state needs more money. So where did the Measure H funding go? What LA County did was they formed a committee of 50 individuals to decide how can we distribute this money. There was no representation from the city of Santa Clarita. I remember going to council and saying to them, guys, what are you going to do about this? How come you're not involved here? And they just let it go. Said, that's not important. So all of these people couldn't agree. This is the LA Times, April the 17th, 2017. You see the little sign in there that says a 2017 chart? Because this is exactly the charts that we used 2.5 years ago to talk about this initiative. And what it said was they had 3 meetings and they couldn't figure out what to do. So they ended up with some people saying, well, let's form a subcommittee. You know, bureaucrats are great at this. You can't figure it out? Let's build another committee. Let's build a subcommittee, and let's try to figure out why all these competing interests can't be funded. And they rejected it. They said, no, that's not what we want to do. We'll just go back to the county and go to their executives and get more advice. So, in fact, the committee had until May the 10th to recommend the 3-year budget of the Board of Supervisors. And they were having trouble getting people to agree to meet. So Phil Ansel, you've seen his name before, who was chairing the meeting, was trying to bribe people to come to the meeting. So we were saying, hey, if you come to our meeting, we'll give you free lunch. How about that? Yeah. But anyway. Joe Lyons, as far as I'm concerned, was the only one that was being reasonable. And he said, he kept intervening in these discussions, and he kept asking about setting up a mechanism so the local governments could get engaged. Local governments are contributing the money. Let's get them engaged. Let's find out what their problems are, but it didn't do any good. Here's the reason why this issue doesn't work, particularly if you put it in front of a bunch of county bureaucrats. The county officials wanted $650 million by year 3. Now realize that by year 3, you would only collect money 1 year because you started in mid-2017, so you would collect money in 2018, and the third year is beginning of this year for 2019, you haven't collected next year's worth of money yet. So they were asking, they said, well, we need, if you want us to help you, we need $615 million by the third year, nearly twice what would be raised by the new tax at that time. Schwartz of Shelter Partnership, who runs homeless shelters, requested for rental assistance and services, and they were willing to offer him $87 million over 3 years. And he says, no, that's way too low. Andy Bates, CEO of the Union Rescue Mission, said, look, just give me half of the money, and I'll make sure that everybody's happy with what we're going to do. We'll just, half the money is what we need to make sure that the homeless population is taken care of. Everybody that currently was in the business were the ones that are begging for money. So they started talking about it, and county starting to say, we need to revise our wish list to get them in line with the resources. And that proposal was finally carried by a majority of the hands, and they presented a budget to the city Board of Supervisors. So what did the city do? Now, Measure H passed, okay? So since Measure H passed, now the city says, oh, there's money. Now we can get involved. So on April the 14th of 2017, they scheduled the first ad hoc committee on homelessness. 2 of our council members, Smythe and McLean, formed it. And the reason why they made an ad hoc committee was because they didn't have to tell you what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Okay? So in an ad hoc committee doesn't require the Brown Act. So you don't have to notice the public when any of the meetings are occurring. You don't have to produce any minutes. You don't have to tell anybody anything. All that they did was keep talking about what a great job they were doing. And you know what? It's 2.5 years later, and they're still doing exactly the same thing. So they invited 20 people at City Hall by special invitation. They invited the sheriffs, they invited Bridge to Home, Domestic Violence Center, PATH, and Family Promise. Now, doesn't that sound a little bit like what I was talking about when the county was trying to figure out where to spend the money? You go and grab these, and by the way, look, I'm not belittling what these organizations do, but the whole thing about it is that there isn't enough money on God's green earth to allow these individuals to solve the homelessness problem. They can take care of a certain amount of people, but they're not going to solve the problem overall. So these are quotes from some of our officials at the time. Marcia McLean said, "You voted for it, you're paying for it, the money is coming back to our community." Really? How intriguing. Katie Hill said, "We are committed to making sure you're getting the money. If you want it, I promise you will be able to get it." Really? Now remember, that's a 2017 chart. That was in the news in 2017. Lori Ender said, "If our taxpayers locally are paying into that, they should see the benefit of it. The county is going to do well with Santa Clarita's tax money." She's probably the closest. They're doing well with it because we're not seeing it. And Cameron Smythe said, "We'll be the first, this will be the first of many meetings, and he hopes to include faith groups in the conversation on homelessness. He plans to host an open Measure A's workshop in the future." You know, I went to the council a couple of times. They kept talking about this. So they finally invited me to one of their meetings. Of course, they invited me to a meeting where they didn't invite anybody else. So there was only one other individual there, and they all had this paper in front of them, and they were talking about it, and I got to, you know, I sat there for the whole meeting and had no clue what they were talking about. So I said, I talked to Cameron on the way out, and I said, "Cameron, you know, it probably would be nice if you're handing out this material to talk about that you kind of gave the community a copy so we could see what was going." And he looked at me and he said, "Well, you're just lucky I invited you." Well, there you go. What a great guy. Okay. So if you're going to combat homelessness, you need some effective strategies. And one of them is to reduce the number of families and individuals to become homeless, and in helping currently homeless families and individuals move into permanent housing. That's their prevention methods. But it only addresses a very small element of the number of homeless people in the streets today. So remember, here we are at 2017, and already people were starting to complain about their rents going up. This is a letter to the editor in the Signal, April 15th, 2017, that Beverly was seeing rent increases from $50 to $100 a month. One-bedroom apartments ranging from $815 to $1,695 a month. That's not bad, considering that now, when the crossings open up, they want $2,200 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. And two-bedroom apartments ranging from $1,330 to $1,799, and senior affordable apartments ranging somewhere around $1,000. Well, I got to tell you what, those numbers are low now. Those are really small. And if you're getting $1,500 a month in Social Security, you're in trouble. So they said 40,000 people are waiting for Section 8 housing in Los Angeles County, and they're only issuing about 1,000 vouchers every year. So it's your money. That's what I said in 2017. We should have a voice in how it's spent. We should have a voice in that homeless task force, which McLean is now backed out of and supposedly Cameron runs in total, because the more suggestions that come out, the more likelihood someone's going to have a suggestion that's actually going to work, right? Instead of just continuing to do what they're doing. So we should question why the City Council was not more proactive when this was initially proposed. And Because if you go to city council meetings a lot, and I unfortunately go to city council meetings a lot, you'll hear them continually lament about the fact, well, we're losing local control. We don't have any local control over stuff. Well, maybe you don't have any local control because you're not demanding local control. You're just throwing your hands up and saying, well, I can't fix that. That's not a problem I can deal with. So in April the 18th of 2017, the Signal did a reader poll. Do you think SCB residents will have a voice in how Measure H funds are spent? 97% of the recipients said no. And you know what? They were correct. So I started off because it's the beginning of the year, and I actually made some New Year's resolutions. Probably wasn't a good thing to do. Well, I made some New Year's resolutions. And one of them was to go back and address some of the big issues that are open. And the first one I decided to tackle was homelessness. So, and I really realized that we're in the 20s again. We're in the roaring 20s. Let's see what's going to happen. You know, there's a lot of parallel between the roaring 20s and today. I mean, the roaring 20s, the stock market was shooting up. Today, the stock market is shooting up, right? The only real difference is I haven't seen any flappers. You see any flappers? Oh, okay. Anyway, my premise is that money alone never solves anything. If all you're going to do is have a bunch of money and say, I got money to spend, you're going to have all kinds of people that want it. Doesn't mean that they're going to save anything or find a solution. And I noticed that our elected officials are very reluctant to try anything other than what they're doing today. Let's not try anything new, because you know what? If you try something new, it may not work. Oh my God. And then if it doesn't work, it's on your watch. So if I don't try anything new, I just keep on going the way we're going. Well, you know what? Everything is really wonderful. And I said at the end of that article that I'm optimistic that our country will figure it out and do the right thing. So if anybody's interested in it, here it is. Go ahead, pass it in. That's the article. So then the issue was, where'd all the money go? And on January the 10th of 2000, they republished something about KCET. Because they said KCET had it right in 2007, when during the Measure H campaign, their position was, the money will go to the same homelessness organizations that let the homelessness get out of hand. Now, I think that was a little harsh, because I don't think that Bridge to Home, as an example, really tried to make homelessness a bigger problem. But one thing that I do know is that there's no way in the world that you're going to build Bridge to Home large enough to solve the problem. So you really need to realize that individuals that are already in some form of a business with homelessness are going to be the first ones to jump out and say, give me more money. I said this Signal, from the very beginning, the City Council did not take much interest in Measure H financial planning, and today we shuffle along without sufficient funds to handle our local homelessness problem. And the city was very upset with me. So they responded. This is the second article, and this is the city's response. Okay? So what is very interesting about the articles I read is that the city is so interested in them, they want to see them before they're published. And at first I was kind of about it, but then I realized they respond. And when they respond, they give me information I didn't have. I always wondered exactly how much money did you get from Measure H? Well, it's right in here. Okay? And so they said right in their article, this is their number, not mine, right? They said we've contributed over $14 million. And from their article, it says we got back $425,000. This is Measure H money. I'm not particularly overjoyed with that.
But the 4% incremental increase due to Measure H, how much revenue are
Yes, in 2 years.
That seems high. I mean,
I told you how hold on.
they're able to tell us how much.
Steve, I told you how I made the estimate. The county said that a quarter cent across the county would collect $355 million a year. And all I did was ratio the population of the county against the population of Santa Clarita. And when you do that ratio, you come out with $7.8 million. And they now 2.5 years later, they have collected that quarter cent sales tax for 2 years. Okay. Now, if that's not the right number, tell me. But, no, I'm not saying you tell me. They should tell me, right?
Absolutely. The city should be able to tell you how much sales tax was generated over that. I mean, they know.
I'm not sure they do. They know how much sales tax is generated in the auto mall, but I don't know whether they know the total amount of sales tax generated in the city.
But they get 1% of the sales tax
Okay.
from the state.
Okay.
And if I'm out of place, just let me know.
No. Look, if that's true, sure, we can.
I understand the city gets 1% of the sales tax.
Sure.
That's generated
Sure.
in the state. State sends it back.
Sure.
So the match should be easy.
Okay. So what do you think our cities and nonprofit leaders are not more vocal about getting their share? Why do you think they're not yelling and screaming more that they want their money? Because I think I know. It works the same way with a lot of these organizations. That if you complain too loudly, they might not give you anything at all. They might, right now, if you criticize them, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to justify it. Now, maybe the way Steve just said might be a great thing to tell me, to turn around and say, you know what, this is how much we really collect. Okay, we don't really get that large amount of money. But they don't do that. They just want to come out and say, look how wonderful we're doing. And if you say something different, I don't think I could get a grant out of the city for the Canyon Country Advisory Committee. They don't like what we say, all right, because we turn around and we look at what's going on. So if you are, let's say, on the board of Bridge to Home, then what you need to do is tell everybody how wonderful the city is and how they're giving you money because they want their fair share, or what they think their fair share is. You know, I was at an event just last Saturday, and I talked to one of the board members at Bridge to Home, and I said, hey guys, when are you going to get a sewer and a water connection? And he said, about 4 months. We're working on it. We got to do a lot of things. It'll be about 4 months. But I've been listening to that story for 20 years. Okay? So I think that's what it goes. So tomorrow, in the news racks, there'll be another article, Fixing the Homeless Problems, How Much Money Will Be Enough? And it's going to talk about a lot of things that we just talked about. Because it's going to answer the city's response. And one of the reasons why I did this for 3 weeks in a row was because every time I wrote something, then I looked and I saw something else about this where there was more money involved. And now I had published that one last week, and then all of a sudden I look in the paper and it says Governor Newsom wants to spend $1.4 billion of California money to affect the homeless. So it tells of, the article tells about the visual homeless individuals on Soledad Canyon. We're starting to see people camping out in the streets here in Santa Clarita. So if they're camping out in the streets here in Santa Clarita, how long before we become Santa Monica unless we do something about it? And so, right in front of Starbucks, the one place west of White Canyon is the one that's most commonly there all the time. So now I was really enamored. You know, my wife and I only told part of the story in the article because I was running out of space. But my wife and I were ready to leave to go somewhere. And we were in our car, and we started to pull out from in front of the house. and looked over and saw this elderly lady kind of staring there at us with her hand out. So we stopped and we put the window down and asked her what was going on. And I think she was an Asian lady because of her mannerisms and her appearance, but she couldn't speak English. She didn't speak Spanish, right? And I kind of got the impression she was trying to find out how to get out of my neighborhood, because she was right in the middle of all the streets that had cul-de-sacs that don't let you out. So with sign language, I'm trying to explain to her where to go, and she finally figures it out, and she says thank you, and goes back to where she's going. So last Saturday, and we wondered when we left, who is this person? What's going on? So last Saturday, I was working out in my garage, and I see her coming down the street, pushing a cart full of plastic, recyclable plastic bottles. And she must be all of 5 feet tall. And it looked like that she had 8 feet of stuff with her. And she saw me in the garage, and she stopped, and she came up with a plastic bottle, and she walked up my driveway and showed me a plastic bottle and made motion like she was hungry, right? And I got the impression that she wanted more plastic bottles. Did I have anything that she could contribute? And I didn't. I kind of signaled to her, no, I don't have any more for you. And she thanked me, and she turned around and started to walk back to her cart. And I felt terrible. I mean, it really pulled on my heartstrings. So I pulled out my wallet and I grabbed a few dollars, and I called out to her. And I went up and I started to give her the money. And she shook her head no. She wasn't asking for money. And I insisted. I kept going, and finally she took it. And she thanked me, and I stood there kind of silently as I watched her push her cart around the corner. Well, where's the help for these kind of people? Where's the help for people that are really just trying to survive? There's nothing wrong with that lady. She's not lazy. She's not just sitting there waiting for people to do things. Right? That is one of the kind of individuals that I think really deserve and need some help. So part of the, yes?
As I was coming home from the shoe repair place just this side of Backwoods, between there and Shangri-La, I saw 5. One guy was sitting on a bench, and he had stuff on the bench. And then he had 4 great big plastic bags next to him. The other 4 were pushing carts, pulling things, and they were all full. That's the most I've ever seen.
Okay. Well, I don't want you guys to think I'm telling you a story. So here's the response. How's that? So anyway, one of the things that the respondent said, and by the way, the respondent was anonymous. So the city responds and they don't tell you who it is, so I would have called them, right? But I'm not going to call around the city and saying, did you write it? Did you write it? No. It says, many other cities in the county are facing public backlash over this. The opposite is true here in Santa Clarita. Well, to me, that sounds like a wake-up call. You're begging, we'll help you out. We'll start going to the city council meeting and start complaining that they're not doing what they should be doing. So, you know what? I decided that we're willing to listen, right? You guys are willing to listen to the city? Sure, we're willing to listen. So I offered the spokesperson a spot on the Canyon Country Advisory Committee agenda. You call me, and I'll be happy to put you on the agenda, and you can come and tell us all about all the wonderful things that the city is doing and what their plans are. So all the spokesman has to do is call me. So are there any questions? Get the microphone in.
Well, from what I understand, the Measure H money that the city did get, they hired like a consultant with the money.
Am I wrong, or? I mean, money has been dispersed from Measure H to the city.
Yes, $425,000.
And they hired a consultant.
Well, it says right in there what they spent it on. They spent $300,000 trying to find property for Family Promise to build a facility to service their clients. $75,000 to hire a part-time homeless coordinator. And what was the last one? What was the $40,000 for? It's right in there. I looked at those things and I didn't see one dime that was directly going to help the homeless. What it was doing was it was hiring people, it was doing studies, it was not doing anything that helps the homeless, it was funding the bureaucrats that were working the problem.
$50,000 fund to be used for development.
The plan.
Your plan.
The plan, yeah. $50,000 for a plan, $75,000 for a part-time homeless coordinator, and $300,000 to do a search to find property for. Those things are not going to help the homeless at all.
I agree.
Huh?
I agree. Do you have any? One thing that I've wondered is, like, what is the nightly bed count at Bridge to Home? Do we have any idea how many people come in for shelter at Bridge to Home each night?
Well, you know what? I believe Mike Foley did tell us. If I remember correctly, they're up to 130 beds. And like I said, I think the KCET discussion was a little harsh. I don't fault Bridge to Home. I think those guys are working as hard as they can. They're doing the best they can with the amount of resources they have. It wouldn't hurt them to have more resources, but they're not going to solve the whole problem. You have to have a much more comprehensive solution going, because there are people that don't want to go to the homeless shelter.
But that doesn't answer the question. Do we know, like on a nightly basis, how many people come in?
I believe if you go back and you look at the video of Mike Foley coming here and talking about it in front of the County Country Advisory Committee, they told us those questions. They answered those questions.
So they're filling 130, because from what I hear from Cameron Smythe is that we're disappointed that the county adjusted our count downwards of homeless people. I don't see 100. I'm figuring that Bouquet Junction is about ground zero for homelessness in Santa Clarita. But I don't see that many people.
Well, I think from the standpoint is that, there are the homeless people that are out on the street. There are groups of homeless that go to the shelter, get picked up at the libraries, and go back to the libraries every day. And the libraries have become our homeless daycare center for that category of individual. Then we have homeless people that are living in their cars. We have different homeless people in different places. Yes, you're correct. They did, on our homeless count last time, they did reduce the number. Whether that's a good number or not, I don't know. But I do know this. They're constantly finding homeless encampments in the river, and they're constantly routing people out. So I remember there was a big homeless encampment right down there behind Ruther in the Wash. I know that we were getting, I had some a motorhome in storage. It got broken into a couple of times. I know that they rousted them out of there. And then if you remember, they had the big group that were in the Wash right by the auto dealers, and they went after them. But they go through constantly and routing them. So what the real number is, I don't know. But I think they can fill 130 beds without any problem. But when they do fill those 130 beds, because of the fact they have certain rules, it's just like my buddy Eddie, the guy I told you about that I picked up coming down here as a functional alcoholic. He would never be able to survive in the homeless shelter. He'd get thrown out of there within 15 minutes when he went off, or when he showed up drunk, or when he, it just doesn't work for everybody. But like I said, I think they're doing the best they can. And I don't begrudge them a little bit more money, but that's not going to solve the problem. Yes.
If you look at that video, you can see Bridge to Home has the progression of their plans and what they're going to put in first, and then second and third, and the women's shelter was furthest away, and it was being built last, so they're just waiting for the sewer connection.
They're waiting for money.
And there were people that were homeless that were living in front of City Hall.
Yes.
And the guy would come in and he would say, I'm going down to 7-Eleven. Would you like me to get you a drink? And he would go down and come back, and they used the restrooms at City Hall, and at night they used the restrooms over at the sheriff's station. And then they were joined by other people, and the city finally said, go. And they put planters in, so that can't happen again.
Well, I know that if you recall also in downtown Newhall, where the homelessness problem is a little bit more centralized. If you remember, they put armrests in the center of all the benches so people couldn't lay down on them. It's an issue that needs to be solved, and in order to solve it, we need a comprehensive plan, and we need a comprehensive method of doing it. I just don't see that we've done that yet.
Maybe they could hire more consultants.
What?
They could hire more consultants.
Yes, we have more consultants. Yes, we do.
But does Bridge to Home get money separate from the city? Because I assume
Yes.
money goes to the city.
You mean money that goes to Bridge to Home separately, that doesn't come through the city? I don't think so. I don't think so. They got the money to operate year-round from the county. It was Barter that put it in. I don't think so. But we can find out. I'm surprised they're not here tonight. Last time I said I wanted to talk about the homeless, they showed up to listen. So there you go. All right.